Welcome to a special program in our series Freethinking Forum. I'm back with Paul Danicic to introduce a film that your Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness has produced a few years ago. Would you introduce it,
Sure.
Paul?
Sure. Thank you. This is a movie called Precious Waters, or the sulfide mining controversy here in Minnesota. We did this a few years ago to sort of explain what it is that is going on in northern Minnesota about sulfide mining or copper nickel mining. So it's a good primer on what's the risks, what is sulfide mining, where is it located, what are they looking at doing, and what it means for the future of the area.
Good. Important to all of us Minnesotans.
Going to make a big hole in the ground with dynamite. The groundwater is going to run into the mine. It's a sulfide ore body. It's going to be polluted.
I think we need to evaluate if this precious metal is worth that much. Is our environment worth less than that?
To me, the Boundary Waters is a place where you can go to forget about all the other responsibilities in your life.
Wonderful natural ecosystem and sanctuary for animals of all kinds.
Well, to me, the Boundary Waters is my education. It's like a classroom, an endless, boundless classroom.
Minnesota. As translated from the Dakota word, the name means clouds reflected in water. Here in the lake country of northeastern Minnesota, it's easy to see why the state's name has long been synonymous with water.
We're all about water. We're wetlands. This isn't the desert of Arizona or the high country in Chile. This is water and cattails right here where we're standing.
Here are countless lakes and streams famous for their fishing. Lake Superior, the largest and cleanest of the Great Lakes. And the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, the most popular wilderness area in the United States. With no roads, no motorboats, no cell phone towers, the BWCA offers visitors the increasingly rare opportunity to experience true wilderness.
There's something about it that gets inside of people and doesn't leave them, those who have touched it. And even for those who haven't ever ventured into the wilderness but maybe come near it, I think Minnesotans understand that this is a special part of who we are.
Given the area's importance as a tourist destination, the heart of the Arrowhead region might be the last place you'd expect to find heavy industry. But several mineral companies are proposing to mine here for precious metals. Exploratory drilling is already underway. If permits are granted, mines could be located at the very edge of the Boundary Waters and close to Lake Superior.
We're looking at pretty vast exploration for new sulfide mining in northern Minnesota. Primarily in the area that drains into the Boundary Waters, so it's actually going to be lakes and rivers and streams that flow directly into the Boundary Waters.
In 1978, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness was designated a wilderness area, and there were lines drawn on a map that said this area is protected. But as we've discovered so often in this world, lines on a map rarely confer perpetual preservation.
One of the most significant things that's going on in northern Minnesota right now is a proposal or series of proposals to mine precious minerals from ores that contain sulfide.
And this is a new form of mining that has never been done in Minnesota before, but been done many other places in the country. And what they're seeking to mine are metals like copper and nickel, some platinum, palladium, maybe a little bit of gold here in Minnesota.
While Minnesota has been home to iron or taconite mining for many decades, sulfide mining, also known as hard rock or non-ferrous mining, has never been tried here. An increasing demand for copper and nickel and the push for economic development in northern Minnesota are spurring the current mining proposals.
As the taconite supply essentially starts to drop or the demand is low, the goal is to find some other kind of mining that can bring back some of the same kinds of jobs that were once there with the taconite industry.
But while mining companies and some Minnesota officials are suggesting the proposed mines could be good for the region's economy, others point to potentially enormous environmental and economic risks.
The primary problem with hard rock mining generally and with what's called sulfide mining in particular is when you take off the overburden, that's the dirt essentially on top of the rocks, you expose rocks that contain what are called sulfides. And when you expose sulfides to air and water, the chemical reaction can produce sulfuric acid. That can then produce what's called acid mine drainage.
Oxygen from air will just go into the rock and convert the sulfur to sulfuric acid. And if you make the rock a powder, it'll do it faster. But it's an air solid reaction generating sulfuric acid. And then you rain on that material and you'll wash off the sulfuric acid and it'll go wherever the water goes in draining away. The water is yellow from the dissolved iron that's in the water because once you increase the amount of acid present in the water, it is capable of then dissolving more of the iron out of the substrates because the pHs of those streams will be 4, 3, 2, 1 in terms of pH and very high concentrations of acid. Acids will do in most aquatic life below a pH of 4.
In Montana and in Colorado particular, places I've skied and fished, I've seen the effects of sulfide mining. There's a famous river in Montana called the Big Blackfoot. It was the river that figured in Norman Maclean's book, A River Runs Through It, and in the movie. Acid mine drainage from mines on the upper Big Blackfoot destroyed the river, destroyed the aquatic ecosystem. A healthy western trout stream is full of aquatic insects. You pick up a stone on the bottom of the Big Blackfoot and the bottom is as clean as the top. It's simply dead.
Unlike iron mining, where you're sort of extracting concentrated ores, the metals that are desired are scattered in small amounts dispersed through the ore. And so in order to do sulfide mining, to extract those metals, you have to dig enormous quantities of earth and rock in order to extract the small bits of metal that you're after. For every 1% of the metal that you're extracting, there's 99% what's considered waste rock. In some cases, this can be done subsurface mining, where you're digging a shaft and extracting it if it's very deep. If it's not that deep, though, mining companies will propose doing open pit mining. And you're talking about enormous pits, sometimes 800 to 1,000 feet down, many acres in size. The Polymet mine that's being proposed in Minnesota right now would have 3 open pit mines and would generate waste rock that would be equivalent to 500 football fields 20 stories high.
To mining companies, the geologic region known as the Duluth Complex, located in the heart of the Arrowhead, east of the Iron Range and just south of the Boundary Waters, presents the possibility of profits. To many Minnesota citizens, the proximity of these mining activities to the Boundary Waters and Lake Superior is alarming. Polymet Mining, a Canadian company, was the first of several companies to request a permit to operate a metallic sulfide mine in Minnesota. Polymet has acquired the former LTV steel taconite processing plant near Babbitt and plans to retool the plant to process precious minerals. The company has proposed an adjacent open-pit sulfide mine to be located between Hoyt Lakes and Babbitt, Minnesota, on land in the Superior National Forest. The proposed mine is sited between the Embarrass River and the Partridge River, both of which flow into the St. Louis River, which in turn flows into Lake Superior. Any contamination from this mine threatens all of these water bodies, the watershed, and the human and wildlife inhabitants within that watershed. Another company, Franconia Minerals, is proposing an underground mine about 30 miles to the northeast.
Franconia is exploring, believe it or not, on the bottom of Birch Lake. Birch Lake is an important recreational lake near Babbitt, Minnesota, south of the Boundary Waters. Waters from the Coishwee River flow out of the wilderness into Birch Lake, then back through the White Iron Chain and back into the Boundary Waters.
We're located on beautiful Birch Lake, just on the edge of the Boundary Waters.
Steve Kischak owns and operates River Point Resort, a second-generation family-run business on Birch Lake.
My wife and I, Jane, have owned this resort for almost 35 years, renting cabins and renting canoe trips for many, many years. I guess I'm concerned about the impact of what this mining is going to do on an environment as a whole. When it initially started, I think a lot of people were very, very much pro-mining. Now I think a lot of people are getting more educated and learning a little bit more about what's going to happen here, and especially with the sulfite pollution that could come. The issue here is if this area is an area that is worth putting an impact of a mine into it. We're going to put the whole area in jeopardy for 20 years of mining. I think we need to evaluate if this precious metal is worth that much. Is our environment worth less than that?
Franconia Minerals controls the majority of the land holdings around Birch Lake and is actively drilling to define the size of the ore bodies and study the feasibility of mining and processing these metals.
Drilling platforms on the lake and surrounding lakeshore are already impacting the experience of customers at the Kischak's resort.
They want trees, they want quiet, they want the serenity of Northwoods, they want to hear the wolf howl in the evening. They're not here to listen to the drone of the drill and the drone of heavy equipment going across the lake.
As a teacher, it's an ideal location to work with students in wilderness because of the high quality of nature here.
Minnesota native David Roloff teaches natural resource management at California State University in Sacramento. He spends summers near Birch Lake as an instructor at the Voyageur Outward Bound School.
Last summer on Birch Lake, a night didn't go by where we didn't hear drills going all night long. The other concern I had was, given where I was on Birch Lake, that I know that there are places inside the wilderness boundary where you can hear those drills. And if we can hear an exploratory drill, my concern is that a major development is going to be a much more long-term impact on wilderness character. And wilderness character includes the ability to be free of signs of humans, and the sound of drill rigs inside the boundary waters is deeply distressing.
Mixed veggies. And what do we have for dessert that night?
I run Paragus Northwoods Company. We are an outfitting business here in Ely, Minnesota. We've been here since 1979, and we're hoping to stay for a lot longer. Ely is at the edge of the Boundary Waters, in the middle of all of the entry points into the Boundary Waters canoe area. An expansion of an industrial complex just to our south along one of the entry points into Ely worries me as a business owner, that the image of the town and our business will be adversely affected. In addition to the environmental damage that sulfide ore mining possibly presents, I believe there's a possible economic disadvantage that worries me as as an ecotourism operator, selling trips into a wilderness area that's has to be maintained in the image of the public as pristine.
Bob and Pat Tamman are retirees from Sedan, Minnesota. Pat worked for 30 years as a school teacher, and Bob worked in the iron mines as an electrician. As a former miner, Bob has first-hand knowledge of mining practices and their consequences.
And when I started working in the mines 40 years ago, most of us citizens weren't very well informed about wetlands and environmental issues. Sometimes we built our tailings dikes on land like this. We put waste piles on land like this. And then years later, you realize the tailings dikes are leaking, the waste piles are leaching, and so now we're dealing with those problems. Pat and I live in Sudan. We love our little underground mine in the old Sudan mine. That mine is still polluting our neighborhood. There's a little copper, a little cobalt in the water that seeps in from the groundwater. We're still dealing with a little pollution from a relatively benign mine. What's going to happen when we open up a sulfide ore body and have to deal with some real pollution?
Nancy Schult is the Water Project's coordinator for the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. Waters on the Fond du Lac Reservation lie downstream of the Polymet project and could be impacted by the mine.
I'm concerned that the state agencies responsible for permitting this are not considering how this kind of mining is different than the ferrous mining that we're all familiar with. And I would also point out that ferrous mining has had tremendous impact on the environment of northeastern Minnesota. And if you add the impacts that come from acid mine drainage and that are very unique to mining a sulfide ore body, I have no confidence that we're going to be able to do that kind of mining in this kind of an environment, a very wet environment, without seeing the same problems that have been seen around the world where this kind of mining takes place.
Also alarming is the pollution track record of this kind of mining in other parts of the country.
Several colleagues of mine did a study where they looked at every environmental impact statement that had been done on a hard rock metal mine in the United States. There were 200 and some. They did a detailed analysis of 20-some of these mines. And what they found was that if you had a metal sulfide mine located in an area near surfaced water and groundwater, which is what most of the upper Midwest is like, in about 80% or more of those cases, you had a violation of water quality standards associated with that mine.
The EPA, just I think a week or two ago, came out with a report in the Federal Register, which again declared hard rock mining the #1 toxic polluter in the United States. And that's not based on mines from 20 or 30 years ago, that's based on mines that are in operation today. So it's not an ancient, old problem that has long been solved, it's a problem that exists today.
We went to South Dakota, the old Dakota mine. We took a look at that, and the young engineer said it was going to cost between 40 and 140 million to clean up the mess left behind by a sulfide mining ore body. And it will require perpetual water treatment, even after they do the final cleanup. And so that's the concern we have with copper mining in Minnesota.
The economic minerals will be removed from the ore along with the sulfides in the plat salt processing.
Despite sulfide mining's dismal environmental record to date, the mining companies argue that new technology will mitigate any future problems with pollution.
Technically, this is sulfide mining, and naturally that's going to raise environmental concerns. However, the rocks are naturally low in sulfur. All the sulfur will be recovered with the metals and contained, and we'll use the latest technologies to mitigate any environmental risk.
We haven't made any major advances. I think it's quite clear we made major mistakes. To state that there's major technology available today as opposed to 20 or even 10 or even 5 years ago is being wildly optimistic.
We don't have any record of to tell us or give us the necessary assurance that this kind of mining operation is going to somehow be environmentally benign.
We've had neighbors on either side of Minnesota, in South Dakota, in Wisconsin, have disastrous pollution problems from their mining, hard rock mining experiences, where aquatic systems are wiped out and the fish are killed, and there's pollution that's emanating from these mines, and in many cases it can last for hundreds of years.
The mining companies tell us, which they did to me, they all came into my office, that they said we will do zero amount of damage. But what I understand is 100% of the companies claim they will do zero damage, but 76% of them were wrong.
Cleaning up mining pollution has often been hampered by insufficient financial assurance, a kind of damage deposit required for mining companies.
Financial assurance is a way to assure that the polluter pays, that the entities who have gained the profit from the mining operation put up the money up front to make sure that any environmental remediation that's going to have to occur gets taken care of.
One of the concerns and one of the patterns we've seen with this type of mining elsewhere is that enormous pollution problems result, and there haven't been adequate financial assurances provided by the mining company so that they go bankrupt and they leave the taxpayers holding the bag for the cleanup problems.
In my view, current legislation and regulatory process in Minnesota is not adequate to protect the public from the costs that will inevitably result if sulfide mining proceeds in northern Minnesota.
And my fear is that with the copper industry, we have the same political establishment, we have a lot of the same mining attitudes, we're going to end up with the same problems, messes that are very expensive to clean up, and we don't have the resources to clean them up.
What's distressing to me now about the sulfide mining issue is the permanence. This is not cutting a tree down for timber value. This is short-term economic gain that has long-term consequences that could be disastrous for many places that we love.
The financial impact on the tourism industry, on recreation, and on clean air and water, health, they are all significant impacts that we need to weigh.
Minnesotans and people who love the boundary waters need to know what's being proposed, know what the risks are, know what the history is, and then decide if this is something we want in our state.
We want healthy communities up here. We want healthy schools. We want to preserve the assets we have that are sustainable for generations rather than short-term copper mining operation.
And so you have to look at what the benefits of the mining are and what the potential costs might be if things go wrong. Again, you have to assume that things may go wrong.
On any boundary waters trip, I inevitably stop at some point and think about what the boundary waters would be like if it hadn't been protected and if people from previous generations hadn't fought to protect it. As somebody now, my age, I'm saying to myself, I need to look 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years in the future and say that if I don't help and if we don't do something to protect it now, our grandchildren aren't going to be out there canoeing and stopping and thanking us. If we can't drink from the lakes or, eat all the fish we want on a canoe trip, that's going to be a real loss.
Wilderness character. A sustainable economy for the Arrowhead region and Minnesota's precious waters all lie in the balance. Minnesota's citizens, one at a time, will shape the outcome of this important debate.
I feel like one person could change the course of history. It's the little steps. It's like JFK said, the ripple effect. And I hope I can do that. And eventually we can all come together and we've done something good for the world.
Thank you for watching. Most of the material, as I said, is correct. There's been a few changes. To go get the latest information, go to the Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness Facebook site or follow us on Twitter. You can find us all and all the information there on this issue. And thank you, Freethinking Forum and Bill, for having us and showing this.
Appreciated seeing Precious Waters.